Hello, friends. My name is Abhay Kumar, and now I am going to discuss the issues of human rights in Sri Lanka. And today, our expert is Nazia Khan. She is doing her PhD at Center for South Asian Studies, School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University in Delhi. She has joined us from Kolkata, where she is living. So, Nazia, thank you very much for joining this Facebook Live.
Thank you, Abhay, for calling me to join this.
Okay, okay. Friends, Hindu newspaper have recently reported, I think on March 13, 2021, that the cabinet has approved banning burqa, that is covering of face, that is also called veil, and it is also going to ban around 1,000 madrasa. So the government, the Rajapaksa government, is all set to ban burqa and ban madrasa. So I am asking this question to Nazia: will it impact the minorities of Sri Lanka negatively? What do you have to say as an expert who has been studying Sri Lankan politics and history for a long time? Yes, Nazia.
Okay, the proposal has been sent regarding banning of burqa and niqab. Actually, we need to see that after the Easter Sunday attack in 2019, the government have been very active targeting the extremism within Muslim community in Sri Lanka. So this banning of burqa and niqab has come in that context that burqa and niqab represent a certain kind of religious extremism within the Muslim community. So if how it's going to impact the minorities, we need to see first of all what is burqa and niqab and how many people are wearing this in Sri Lanka as of now. So burqa and niqab, there's difference. Burqa is it covers your whole body and even the eyes of a woman, while niqab is something which leaves eyes uncovered while it covers rest of your body. So the government, especially the public security minister Sarat thinks that this depicts extremism. And actually, as of now, Muslims in Sri Lanka, there is a certain minority which is wearing burqa and niqab. So I don't know how it's going to impact, but there is certain kind of message which is going to be sent towards Muslims. Anyway, since 2009, when the civil war has ended with the Tamil insurgents, the government, the religious extremism within Sri Lanka has been actively targeting the Muslim community now. So the government, especially the Rajapaksa government, which harps on this Sinhala Buddhist nationalism, and they have consolidated this Sinhala Buddhist nationalism within Sri Lanka, has been very vocal and very supportive of this kind of activities. And so the Easter Sunday attack and after that targeting of Muslims has increased in Sri Lanka. So, of course, the minority will see it as a backlash towards itself from the government. So, yeah, that's what I think.
Okay, I think we should also take some questions on social, educational, and also economic profile and condition of the Muslim minorities in Sri Lanka. I was just doing some research before this conversation has started. Buddhists in Sri Lanka, they are around 70%, 70. Hindus are around 12.58%. Muslims are around 9.66, that is 10%, around 10%, and Christian is less than 1%. So please, Nazia, please tell us the situations of minorities, particularly Muslims in Sri Lanka.
Okay, so particularly Muslims, like you cannot see them in isolation. You also need to take into account what Tamils have been suffering since independence. So Tamil minorities is the largest minorities within the minorities in Sri Lanka. And since independence, they have been under the target, whether it was Sinhala only policy, Sinhala only language policy, which was passed in 1956, and then targeting of Tamils, their education and their jobs, which was happening. Ultimately, the insurgency within the Tamil community, the Prabhakaran case and everything, it's out and open how the war took place in 2009, how it has ended, and even after the war has ended, the reconciliation and human rights issue of Tamil, but the targeting of Muslim minorities, which is around 9% within Sri Lanka, it has started happening since 2009. So these minorities, Muslim minority, largely have been silent in Sri Lanka. Whether it was the issue with Tamils, which happened even when Tamils and Tamil insurgency was on, Muslims have suffered a lot, especially in eastern province of Sri Lanka. Tamils were targeted by Muslims were targeted. Many Muslims, around 1 lakh Muslims, have been targeted in eastern province by Tamil insurgency, and they have largely remained silent over the issue with the Tamils. But since 2009, we see that how Muslims have become the target by the the rising Buddhist nationalism and the religious extremist group like Bodhu Bala Sena and etc., who especially targets the business of Muslims. This has been the rising. The thing is, we have to see that Sinhala Buddhists were primarily, they were agriculturists, and even the riots which took place even before independence or after independence against the Muslims, which riot has taken place in Sri Lanka, have largely based on economy. Like, they have targeted the business of Muslims, and since 2009, the business of Muslims have been seen the target. Like, Muslims businesses are being targeted very openly, and even the places of religious worshipping, mosque and all, have been targeted. But there is also concern from the Muslim community, within the Muslim community also, that over the years they have changed. Like, there is Arabization, there is influence of Arab culture, and also the religious extremism maybe is also growing little by little within Muslim community also. So the scholars have also pointed out that there is both. Like, one, there is rise of Buddhist nationalism and the religious extremism within the Buddhism, which is targeting the Muslims, and also within the Muslim community there is a concern for the rise of extremism. So both needs to be, when you are dealing with extremism and dealing with violence and terrorism, you need to balance everything. You don't need to pick one religion and say that this is the religion which is only about violence, about terrorism. Because if today you think Easter Sunday attack, which was in Sri Lanka, the largest attack which took place after so long, so if you are concerned about the thing that Islamic extremism, because of Islamic extremism, such a large scale of violence took place and many people lost their lives. Similarly, Buddhist extremism since 2009 have been targeting Muslims. There have been riots, Aludgama riots took place, and even before 2019 elections, in 2018 riots have taken place. Facebook have accepted the fact that because of Facebook and the open hatred propagated by religious extremist groups has resulted in the riots, and the businesses have been attacked. So the government seems to be very particularly targeting one community and ignoring the other form of extremism.
Okay, Nazia, it has been the argument of let's say majoritarian right in Sri Lanka, and also we also see such voices in India also. They argue that burqa has never been part of the Muslim society. It has been imposed. Muslims have been under the influence of, let's say, Arab Islam, and that is why they are not following the Islam of their land, maybe the Indian Islam or Sri Lankan Islam. They are being influenced by the outsider forces. That is why it is seen as a threat. such argument is also mouthed by progressive forces also. So how do you respond to that objection?
See, I am not a religious, I have not studied Islam per se, but yeah, of course, because I'm a Muslim, I can say, yeah, I, people do wear burqa, people do some by choice, but largely we can see there's a pressure from within the family that people wear burqa. So, burqa and niqab being associated with extremism, I don't understand. Like, even European countries have started this debate over burqa and niqab that Muslim shouldn't wear. So the whole debate for me is I cannot take side. I don't know, because they cite security reasons, like for banning burqa and niqab, they cite security reason that it's a threat for the security. But I don't know which side to take place, because it's a personal choice also at the same time. If I want to dress a certain way, it's my personal choice. So if I'm dressing a certain way, that doesn't mean that I'm a extremist or I'm a terrorist. So how a government, like within the community, these debates need to be, we need to the Muslim community, within the community, these debates need to take place, that why there is rise in how why there is rise within the Muslim women community, that they have started wearing burqa. The debates and discussion, these things should take place within the Muslim community, and I think from there the government should engage and then come about with certain, because imposing any law on somebody, like there is a prevalence of wearing burqa and niqab within the Muslim community. So imposition of such things on the community, that you cannot wear it because it is propagating extremism or terrorism, I think it's a very bad example to say. I think it's driving towards Islamophobia, which is rising. Like certain, if the government is going to propagate such ideas, it is only going to help the Islamophobist in their cause.
Okay. We have seen that the incumbent government has used the issue of security during elections, and it was voted to power. And now the public security minister, Sarath Veerasekara, has also invoked prevention of terrorism law, and he has said that he is going to use it to curb religious extremism. In India also, UAPA is being invoked against religious minorities, against all those who are opposing government policies. Why the states in South Asia are using and misusing and making and remaking draconian law? Is it not a threat to democracy?
Yes, of course. But first, like India case is different. Like India, of course, it's a vibrant democracy. It has been a vibrant democracy. And for Sri Lanka, I would like to say that it's an ethnocratic democracy. It has always been that ethnocratic democracy. So in Sri Lanka, when you see after the rise of Rajapaksas, how the situation has changed, like especially the militarization has also increased, like the control of military over the institutions and political power. Like Gotabaya Rajapaksa was a defense minister when the civil war was taking place. He was the defense minister then, now he's the president. So the draconian laws which they are devising, and as Tambia, if you read Tambia, he's already talked about how the majority has a minority complex, and it's true for South Asia per se, that majority has a minority complex, and then they devise such laws in the name of security, which is targeted towards minorities. The majority, even though they have certain kind of, they enjoy certain kind of support from the government. So even if they are involved in anything, they don't come under question. Their nationalism, their role, their nationalism is never questioned. But for minority, it's always using security, using nationalism. They are targeted. The laws is devised in order to target minorities. Even in India, the same thing is happening. The same terror laws, the same in Sri Lanka. 200, a lot of people, lawyers. Lawyers have been targeted. Businessmen, Muslim businessmen have been targeted. They have been, under the law, the anti-terrorism law, they have been put into jails, and their trial has not even started without any source. Like it's for South Asia in general, we can say that these laws are devised for the minority community, and they are seen as a threat to the nation. Like Sri Lanka has always been a Sinhala Buddhist nation, and it has promoted Sinhalese and Buddhism, and they have considered, like for Tamils it was so difficult, like for so long they have suffered. And even now, like in Jaffna University, there was a memorial in the name of the Tamils. Around 1 lakh Tamils have lost life in Mulaivikal. So recently, that statue was targeted, and the the PSM, the Sarath Veerasenka, had said that there should be no memory related to the terrorist. So they consider that those people who lost life in the